I'm excited to be here at this retail day to talk about maximizing retention by improving customer experience and how we do it at Vivino. So the agenda for today, we'll focus on a few key areas, including how we use Looker at Vivino, what our strategy is around improving customer retention, and where we are heading in the future. So about me, my name's William Moore. I'm currently the Director of Business Intelligence at Vivino. I have a small team. We handle everything from ETL to data modeling, data analysis, and presentation, as well as managing our Looker instance and our data warehouse. So pretty much every aspect of data, we have our hands in it in some way. I've been at Vivino about 5 years now, and actually in the wine industry for 15. So, worked on analytics projects before for some other smaller companies. Like most of my colleagues, I'm a data nerd and an avid wine drinker, which means it's a great job where you can dig through data, find insights, and have a glass of wine at your desk. So what is Vivino? Vivino, we're the world's largest online wine marketplace and actually the most downloaded wine app. And we're powered by a community of millions of users. Our unique shopping experience uses community data to suggest and personalize wine recommendations, making wine discovery and purchase fun, accessible, and effortless for wine drinkers of every level. By the numbers, we have the largest wine database and the most wine reviews in the world, with over 40 million users who have rated more than 160 million wines. We've also grown pretty dramatically over the years. For instance, last year, we surpassed 1 billion scans. So with the app, you can scan a wine and get a lot of information about it. For some context of our trajectory, it took us 5 years actually to reach 100 million scans. But going from 1 billion scans to 1.1 billion, that other 100 million only took 2 months. So Looker at Vivino, in 2018, we implemented Looker as our analytics and visualization platform. Beforehand, we're probably like a lot of other startups and companies where we had a lot of people writing SQL queries, sharing data through spreadsheets. But at some point, we knew that if we were going to scale, we needed to add some data governance and add a unified platform just so everyone could get the same information from the same place. And we as a BI team could be confident that what users are looking at is the correct way to look at it. And currently, we literally use Looker to run almost every part of the business. In the SF office, when I walk around, everyone has Looker open, and it's probably the most prominent thing on one of their screens, and they're digging through data. For instance, our e-commerce and operations team uses Looker to track the health of our e-commerce marketplace. So they're able to identify any areas where we need to improve. For instance, fulfillment issue, maybe time to ship, and they're able to proactively respond to those issues in fairly real time, which has helped us, come up with best practices on how we want to deal with situations when they arise. On the customer experience side, our CX team uses Looker to analyze customer feedback via NPS surveys, as well as ratings that users give to wines after they purchase them. Allows us to identify opportunities for expansion and opportunities for improvement, and of course allows us to maintain the marketplace and customer experience health that we feel is necessary. On the marketing and CRM side, our teams are really focused on engaging with customers, identifying what marketing efforts are producing happy customers, customers who come back to buy more, as well as what's working or not working in our acquisition efforts. So today I really want to focus on how we look at retention and use Looker from the customer experience side, and how we use the data to identify opportunities to improve our relationships with our consumers, which in turn improves our retention rates, which is a critical component as the business scales. So for Vivino, our customer retention strategy follows this pattern, which is pretty common, and most organizations use something similar to this. First, doing EDA, digging through the data, trying to find trends, we can identify issues that may exist. For instance, is it taking too long to get a wine to a consumer? Or did a consumer buy a wine and not rate it that well after the purchase? So once we identify these issues, we throw some ideas around and consider, what are some practices that we could put in place that may fix this issue. And then, of course, next step is measuring the success of those practices. So not everything's always successful, but the important thing is to be able to try something and actually prove with the data that it wasn't successful or that it was successful. In this case, we could consider it our retention rates. Is our retention rate improving after we implemented this strategy? And finally, using those findings to predict what will be successful in certain situations or markets and applying it to those markets. So being able to identify, a trend before, maybe a trend that leads to an issue, and being able to alleviate that before the issue actually arises. So with Looker, and this is back in 2018, when we implemented it, it was super easy for us to kind of get up and running. And one of the things we loved was the analytic blocks that we could see on their website, which just gave us some guidance on here's some best practices of how to implement this kind of analysis with Looker. So one of the first things we did was build out the retention block, which allowed us to easily model, visualize, analyze retention rates across different markets or different user bases to see if we could find anything underneath the data. We also developed some dashboards on the ops side to identify whether or not users are happy with their wine purchase. And this is what I was speaking about with the ratings. So, maybe a user rates a wine and 2 months later gives it a poor rating. So we want to know, is that happening? When's that happening? Who's that happening to? And what can we do to fix it? A really critical area for us that we implemented a while ago was, a really robust survey system. So this includes NPS and sentiment analysis, and there's a variety of areas that these surveys go out to, but they allow us to collect a ton of data and do a ton of analysis, including sentiment scoring and classification, really giving us a deep insight into the customer's voice. So our top level metric that indicates whether we're improving or need to focus on improvements is month-over-month retention, which is basically how many users placed an order in one period and came back and repurchased at a later date, and what was the length of time between that. It's really a metric that's indicative of all the efforts that we've taken to ensure customer happiness, and is a company-wide effort. So everyone from operations to communications, marketing, CRM, CX, product engineering are, everyone plays a role in making customers happy and getting them to come back to purchase again. We generally look at 30, 60, 90-day retention rates. And it's really helpful for us to be able to look at these metrics on a daily basis and spot any downward trends if it happens. I think it's common knowledge that retaining a customer is way more efficient than acquiring a new one. So we want to maximize the number of users that come back for subsequent purchases. Of course, we work on acquisition efforts as well. But once we get people into the funnel, we want them to be happy, stay in the funnel, keep purchasing at their own rate, and enjoy what they're getting out of interacting with Vivino. On the CX and Ops side, we utilize a couple of strategies heavily to inform, the retention metric itself, and dig a little deeper and seeing what's working and what we can improve. So the first strategy is that, as I mentioned, we do a lot of survey work. And these are, very short and simple surveys that, customers don't mind completing because they don't take 10 minutes. It may take, 30 seconds or so. So there's a variety of triggers that can send out this survey. So after you purchase a wine on Vivino, you may be asked if you want to complete a survey. After you get your order delivered, you may get another request to see if you'd like to complete a survey about your experience. And this is basically an NPS survey, which is Net Promoter Score. So Net Promoter Score is just a measure of a customer's likeliness to recommend a product. Literally, I think the question is, how likely are you to recommend Vivino to someone else? And it's a scale of 1 to 10, and there's 3 categories of respondents. So there's promoters who they responded with a 9 or 10. They're seriously going to recommend Vivino to somebody else. There's neutral, which would be 7 or 8. And then there's detractors, which would be anybody below 7. So, obviously a 1, somebody who would never recommend, had some experience that they didn't want to have anything to do with the product again. So basically you take that, it's the promoters minus the detractors over the total number of respondents. So it's a scale of -100 to 100. Generally 70 plus is considered awesome, like you're doing great. So that's kind of the main purpose of that survey, but we do include some categorical questions. So, what went well with your experience? What can we improve on? And, generally a free-form text question that, allows the consumer to respond to anything else that they wanted to mention to us that wasn't part of the survey. So this allows us to do a few things. We develop a baseline metric, numeric metric, to gauge our efforts that everyone can understand. It's a number. and we track it to see if we're improving over time. So is our NPS going up? Is it going down? Where is it going up? Where is it going down? It also allows us to understand customer pain points and kind of specific areas that we could improve on. So, maybe it took too long to get you your order, and you complete the survey, and you mentioned that, and then we start looking into that and see if there's something we can fix in the future. As well as we run sentiment analysis, if they have the free-form text, which gives us really nuanced picture of kind of how happy the customer is with the product and with their orders. So these surveys have been an invaluable resource. Really, we think a lot about playbooks at Vivino, so kind of best practice strategy guides. So we can combine this survey data and lay it over markets, say markets with great retention rates, and see what correlation is between our survey data and that market. And then we can deduce what parts of the surveys might be driving that. Then we can go to another market and take those findings and say, you're underperforming here, that market overperformed there, so let's apply whatever that market is doing to the underperforming one. Over the past couple of years, we've really been implementing these playbooks, especially if we go into a new market or we experience, a market maybe that we feel is underperforming somewhat. Obviously, this probably makes sense to everyone. Sometimes our best performing markets are the ones where customers are getting their orders fast. So everyone wants to order something and have it in 5 minutes, and our data definitely shows that that is true, even though it can be difficult. So another strategy we adopted early on, which is not as active as giving a customer survey, is tracking the journey the user made after they purchased the wine till they scanned it and rated it, which can be difficult because a user may purchase a wine and put it in the cellar or save it for a special occasion and not rate it for a few months. So Vivino's rating system is on a scale of 1 to 5. Generally the average is around 3.5 or so, but we would consider probably 1 or 2 to be something that we would need to look into. And these users, they may buy the wine and scan it later and give it a 1 or a 2 and not tell us anything about that besides the actual rating itself. And maybe they could just keep on buying. So it's important for us to know, should we take some kind of action when we see these events happening? We definitely want to dig into it and find out, if it was something on our end or, maybe something else. It's important to keep in mind, we launched the marketplace a handful of years ago, and before that, we had a huge user base that was super active. They still are, scanning wines, rating wines, interacting with community, and they hadn't purchased wine before through the app. So when we first launched the marketplace, it was super important for us to track these first-time buyers, long-time users, to make sure that we really wanted that first experience to be great, because that keeps them coming back more. So what we found on the feedback side, and this is something that's obvious that is great to show with data, is that users who had good experiences were 3 times as likely, good NPS scores, 3 times as likely to purchase again, and actually purchase 4 times as much as users who may not have had, that perfect experience. It's totally intuitive. If you have a bad experience, you're not going to repeat doing something. But it was amazingly powerful to be able to surface this in Looker in a compelling visualization and say, here's the data that actually supports that. It's true. And it really helped us spearhead a lot of continued efforts into making sure that we had, great first-time experience for buyers and great continuing experience for buyers. So reacting and responding. At Vivino, we rely heavily on schedules and alerts to help us manage the business. The great thing about Looker is that it's so easy for our users to interact and set up schedules. Our teams, as I mentioned, we review all low-rated orders, decide if we need to take some kind of action, as well as monitoring all of our NPS surveys and take action when the numbers dictate it. As well as on the upside, making sure that all fulfillment issues, anything related to the journey of the wine from order to the customer is perfect. And it's really easy for them to create these custom schedules and alerts. I looked the other day, we have over 200 of these running on a daily basis. And it's great for me because we on the BI side, we've set up the data governance and we're confident that the data is correct. And that allows the users to circumvent maybe coming to us to ask for a special report they want delivered, or us having to write some script where, we believe in the data and are totally fine with them creating as many schedules and as alerts as they need to successfully run the business. So measuring success, with all these practices in place, it's pretty easy for us to measure from a data-driven perspective whether or not our efforts are producing better results. So for instance, the NPS score, it's a number we can say, is it higher than it was last week? And if it is, that means we've done something correct. So once we identify these successes, right, as I mentioned, in a market, we really look how we can apply these to all markets. And that's what I mean by developing these playbooks. And they've been super successful at converting markets into performant ones. And because we have this shared knowledge now, also saves a lot of time because we're not digging through the data. We see an issue and say, this is probably the solution, let's try it out. For instance, this is one of our period over period comparisons for NPS. As I mentioned, we do a lot of period over period analysis. So are we doing better than we were last week or last month or last year? We want to constantly be improving. And so NPS is great for that. We can immediately look at these reports and know exactly where action needs to be taken, or where maybe we need to dig into and see why they're doing so great. So the last part is making predictions. So we're working on this currently in a few areas. Customer retention is all about customer experience. And one of the things that's important to customer experience is making sure that there's good communication between the consumer and us. And that means we need to have staff available to answer questions that may arise, or deal with open tickets. So for us, it's really important. Wine is not a simple thing. So we want our agents to be trained well, and it's not something you can do in a couple hours. So on the BI side, we're trying to predict with the data we have at hand, what will our inbound contact rate be? So we can actually go back to the CX team and say, it looks like we may see a spike coming up soon. You may want to scale out, which will allow us to provide kind of seamless customer experience and work smarter instead of harder. Also, as we expand into more markets, we started out the marketplace in US and Denmark and have expanded to a handful of countries after that, including many in Europe, Hong Kong, Canada, and Brazil. And when we open these markets, the great thing has been that we have all this data from all the markets that went before it. And so we're able to look at characteristics of the user base and other variables and see what we've done in other markets and predict, what kind of success we would expect, as well as, what do we think how are their customers going to interact with the product and the ordering, and what can we anticipate, retention driving issues before they even happen. Another thing is just, we have a lot of review and rating data. So it really allows us to spot trends in the market. So that would be what people are drinking, or even maybe something's out on social media or an influencer has posted something, and we're able to spot these in our data pretty quickly, which is great because then we can inform our merchant partners and ensure that, it's a marketplace. So we need to make sure that we have the supply to meet the demand of the consumer. So, okay, we did all that work. So what do we have to show for it? So since we first identified that we should really make an effort to increase our NPS, we've seen about 30% increase in our post-delivery NPS score. And another interesting thing is because of these playbooks, we've been able to have a higher NPS out of the gate in new markets because we've already anticipated, a list of things that we realize we should make sure we're taking care of. Similarly, we've seen around a 20% increase in customer retention since we've implemented Looker. Of course, that's a company-wide effort, as I mentioned before. We can't really assign it to any one team or person, but the collective effort across the board. So kind of what's next for Vivino? We're really excited. We've built out this great Looker instance, and now we're starting to leverage it more externally as opposed to internally. We've been using it 2 years internally, and we've just started building out data products for our winery partners using the Looker embedded functionality that will allow them to have a portal on our site where they can actually do the same kind of analysis that we're doing on their products and kind of understand how users are rating and reviewing their products, as well as seeing how they stack up against competition. So, here's what you've set the price for on your wine. Here's what the market will bear for it. Or, this is your Napa cab, and this is, how the rating stacks up to similar Napa cabs in the same price range. On the merchant partner side, we're evaluating the same embedded functionality in order to provide e-commerce partners some super valuable information on trends in consumption, especially pricing. So letting them be able to look at their inventory and be competitive with the rest of the prices on the marketplace, which in end, of course, makes the consumer happy and keeps them coming back.